The storm before the revelation. The rain hammered against the bulletproof windows of the silver Bentley as it glided through Manhattan's glittering streets. Inside the luxurious cabin, the silence was suffocating. 7 months pregnant and exhausted, Maya Chen pressed her hand against her swollen belly, feeling her son's restless kicks as if he could sense the tension radiating from his father. Across from her sat Alexander Kane, her millionaire husband of 3 years, his jaw clenched tight as granite. His steel-gray eyes stared straight ahead, refusing to meet her gaze. The charity gala they'd just left should have been a triumph, another successful evening of networking and philanthropy for his real estate empire. Instead, it had become a nightmare. "Alexander, please," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible, over the engine's purr. "I didn't do anything wrong." His head snapped toward her, those cold eyes blazing with fury. "Nothing wrong? You embarrassed me in front of everyone who matters in this city." Maya's heart clenched. The incident replayed in her mind like a broken record. Richard Blackwood, a wealthy investor known for his wandering hands and lewd comments, had cornered her near the champagne fountain. When he'd placed his sweaty palm on her pregnant belly and made a disgusting remark about lucky husbands getting to sample the goods, she'd stepped back in horror. That's when the stranger had intervened. An older gentleman with kind eyes and silver hair had appeared beside them, his presence commanding immediate respect. Without raising his voice, he'd simply said, "I believe the lady would prefer you remove your hand." The authority in his tone had made Blackwood retreat instantly, muttering apologies. "Mr. Sterling was protecting me," Maya said, her voice growing stronger. "Richard was being inappropriate, touching my stomach without permission, saying vile things about the baby." Alexander's laugh was bitter and cruel. "James Sterling? Do you have any idea who that man is? He controls more shipping routes than most countries. I've been trying to get a meeting with him for 2 years, and you made me look like a weakling who can't even control his own wife." The words hit Maya like physical blows. Control his wife? When had their marriage become about control rather than love? She remembered their wedding day, how Alexander had whispered promises about building a life together, about being partners in everything. Now she felt like nothing more than an accessory, a beautiful object to enhance his image. "I'm not property to be controlled," she said quietly, but her defiance only fueled his rage. "Property?" Alexander's voice rose dangerously. "You think you're not property? Look around you, Maya. This car, those diamonds around your neck, the roof over your head, I paid for all of it. You were cataloging dusty artifacts in some forgotten museum when I found you. I made you into something worth having." Each word was a knife to her heart. Maya had given up her career as an art curator to be the perfect socialite wife. She'd abandoned her dreams, her friends, even her independence, all to fit into Alexander's carefully constructed world of wealth and status. The Bentley turned onto a dark side street, several blocks from their penthouse. Maya frowned, recognizing they were heading away from home. Through the partition, she could see the back of their driver's head. Thomas, a quiet man in his 60s who'd been hired 6 months ago through an elite security firm. He always maintained perfect professionalism, but Maya had noticed his kind demeanor, the way he would adjust the temperature without being asked or ensure there was always bottled water in her seat pocket. "Where are we going?" Maya asked, a chill of fear running down her spine. Alexander's smile was predatory. "You wanted to be independent tonight. You wanted to handle things yourself instead of staying quiet like a proper wife should. Fine. Be independent." The car pulled to a stop on a deserted street corner. Rain lashed the windows with increasing intensity, and Maya could hear thunder rumbling ominously overhead. Alexander leaned forward and tapped the partition with his platinum wedding ring. Thomas unlocked the doors. Maya's blood turned to ice. "Alexander, what are you doing? I'm 7 months pregnant. It's storming outside." "Getting rid of a problem," he said coldly, reaching across her to push the door handle. The door swung open, letting in a blast of freezing rain and wind. "You embarrassed me tonight. In my world, there are consequences for failure. Please think about the baby. The baby will learn what happens when you defy me," Alexander snarled, His mask of civility completely dropped. "Now get out of my car." Maya stared at him in absolute shock. This couldn't be happening. Her husband, the father of her unborn child, was actually throwing her out into a thunderstorm. The man she'd loved, the man she'd trusted with her future, was abandoning her in the most vulnerable moment of her life. When she didn't move fast enough, Alexander placed his hands on her shoulders and pushed. Not violently, but with enough force to make her stumble toward the open door. "I said get out." Sobbing now, Maya climbed out of the car, her designer gown immediately soaking through as the rain pelted her. Her delicate heels slipped on the wet pavement as she turned back to the car, hoping against hope that this was just a cruel joke, that Alexander would come to his senses. Instead, he slammed the door shut without a backward glance. But the car didn't move. Maya stood there, shivering and bewildered as she watched the driver's door open. Thomas stepped out into the downpour, not even bothering with an umbrella. His face was set in hard lines she'd never seen before, and there was something different about the way he carried himself, an authority that seemed to command the very storm itself. He walked around to Alexander's door and opened it. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Alexander's voice carried through the rain. "I give the orders here, get back in the car and drive." Thomas said something too quiet for Maya to hear, but whatever it was made Alexander's voice rise to a shout. "You're fired. I'll have you blacklisted from every security firm in the city." What happened next defied all logic. Alexander Kane, the powerful millionaire who struck fear into the hearts of business rivals, actually got out of the car. He stood arguing with the driver for several moments before throwing his hands up in disgust and stalking off into the storm, disappearing around a corner like a defeated child throwing a tantrum. Maya watched in amazement as Thomas approached her, removing his suit jacket despite the rain. With infinite gentleness, he draped it around her shoulders, the warmth immediately providing relief from the bone-deep chill. "Come, my dear," he said, his voice carrying a refined accent she'd never noticed before. "Let's get you somewhere safe and dry." He guided her not to the back seat but to the front passenger seat, helping her settle in before closing the door, carefully. As he got back into the driver's seat, Maya studied his profile with new eyes. There was something familiar about him, something that nagged at the edges of her memory. "Thomas?" she whispered. "What just happened? Why did Alexander leave?" He started the engine and pulled away from the curb, heading toward the more exclusive neighborhoods of the city. When he spoke, his voice was different. No longer the deferential tone of a hired driver, but something much more commanding. "My name isn't Thomas, Maya," he said gently, glancing at her with eyes full of paternal warmth. "And what just happened is that your husband made the biggest mistake of his pathetic life." The car turned onto a tree-lined street in the Upper East Side, pulling up in front of an elegant townhouse that radiated old money and established power. As they stopped, the man she'd known as Thomas turned to face her fully. "My real name is James Sterling," he said quietly, "and I've been waiting 25 years to properly meet you." Maya's world tilted on its axis. James Sterling, the billionaire shipping magnate Alexander had been desperately trying to impress. The man who had effortlessly made Richard Blackwood back down with just a few words. The same man who had been driving her around for months, watching over her, protecting her from the shadows. "I don't understand," she breathed, her hand instinctively moving to her belly as the baby kicked harder, as if sensing the monumental shift occurring in their lives. James's eyes filled with an emotion so deep it made Maya's throat tight. "Your father, David Chen, was my business partner and best friend for 15 years before you were born. When he died in that car accident when you were 10, I made him a promise. I swore I would always watch over his little girl, make sure she was safe and protected." The memories came flooding back. Her father's stories about his business partner, James, who had helped build their import company from nothing. The mysterious benefactor who had paid for her education after her father's death, always through anonymous scholarships and grants that her mother had attributed to her father's insurance policies. "You've been watching over me all this time," Maya whispered. "From a distance, yes, I wanted you to live your own life, make your own choices. But when you married Alexander Kane..." James's jaw tightened. I had my concerns, so I arranged to be placed as your driver through my security company. I wanted to stay close, just in case. Just in case what? James looked out at the storm still raging around them, then back at Maya with eyes that burned with protective fire. Just in case. The day came when I'd need to remind someone that David Chen's daughter is under my protection, and that attacking her is the same as attacking me. Maya felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in hours they weren't tears of despair. Alexander has no idea who you really are, does he? None whatsoever, James confirmed with a slight smile that held no warmth for her husband. But he's about to find out. Tomorrow morning, Alexander Kane is going to discover that throwing a pregnant woman out of a car in the middle of a thunderstorm has consequences, especially when that woman happens to be the goddaughter of one of the most powerful men in international commerce. As if summoned by his words, lightning illuminated the sky, and Maya realized that the storm was just beginning, both outside and in the carefully constructed world Alexander had built around his fragile empire. The billionaire Godfather had revealed himself, and there would be hell to pay.